In section 13 of Han Feizi, there is a famous anecdote or a folk story of Mr. He's Jade. The story of Mr. He's Jade is found in many early Chinese philosophical works. In some versions, Mr. His name is given as Bain He. The list of Chu kings to whom he presented his treasure varies. Let's continue reading Han Feizi. Let's read section 13, Mr. He. Once a man of Chu named Mr. He, having found a piece of jade matrix in the Chu mountains, took it to court and presented it to King Li. King Li instructed the jeweler to examine it, and the jeweler reported, "It is only a stone." The king, supposing that He was trying to deceive him, ordered that his left foot be cut off in punishment. In time, King Li passed away, and King Wu came to the throne, and He once more took his matrix and presented it to the king. King Wu ordered his jeweler to examine it, and again the jeweler reported, "It is only a stone." The king, supposing that He was trying to deceive him as well, ordered that his right foot be cut off. He, clasping the matrix to his breast, went to the foot of Chu mountains, where he wept for 3 days and nights. And when all his tears were cried out, he wept blood in their place. The king, hearing of this, sent someone to question him. "Many people in the world have had their feet amputated. Why do you weep so piteously over it?" The man asked. He replied, "I do not grieve because my feet have been cut off. I grieve because a precious jewel is dubbed a mere stone, and a man of integrity is called a deceiver. This is why I weep." The king then ordered the jeweler to cut and polish the matrix, and when he had done so, a precious jewel emerged. Accordingly, it was named the Jade of Mr. He. Rulers are always anxious to lay their hands on pearls and precious stones. Though He presented a matrix whose true beauty was not yet apparent, he certainly did no harm to the ruler thereby, and yet he had to have both feet cut off before the real nature of his treasure was finally recognized. This is how hard it is to get a treasure acknowledged. Rulers nowadays are not nearly so anxious to get hold of laws and state policies as they are to get hold of He's jade, and they are concerned about putting a stop to the private evils and deception of the officials and common people. Under these circumstances, if a man who truly understands the way hopes to avoid punishment, his only resort is simply not to present to the ruler any uncut jewels of wisdom and statecraft. If the ruler follows set policies, then the high ministers will be unable to make arbitrary decisions, and those who are close to him will not dare try to sell their influence. If the magistrates enforce the laws, then vagabonds will have to return to their farm work, and wandering knights will be sent to the battlefields, where they belong to face the dangers of their profession. In effect, then, laws and policies are actually inimical to the private interests of the officials and common people. Hence, if a ruler does not have the strength of character to defy the counsel of the high ministers, rise above the criticisms of the common people, and heed only that advice which truly accords with the way, then the planners of law and policy may persist. like Mr. He, until they face the death penalty itself, and yet the true value of their words will never be acknowledged. In former times, Wu Shi advised King Tao of Chu on the customs of the state. The high ministers have too much power, he said, and the enforced lords are too numerous. Hence, they pose a threat to their ruler above and oppress the common people under them. Such a path will only impoverish the state and debilitate its army. It would be better for you to confiscate all titles and stipends of the enfeoffled lords after the third generation, reduce the ranks and salaries of your various officials, prune away the offices that serve no vital need, and employ only those men who have proved themselves able and experienced. King Tao acted on this advice, but a year later he passed away, and Wu Qi was torn limb from limb by the men of Chu. Lord Shang taught Duke Xiao of Qin how to organize the people into groups of 5 and 10 families that would spy on each other and be corporately responsible for crimes committed by their members. He advised him to burn the Book of Odes and Book of Documents and elucidate the laws and regulations, to reject the private requests of powerful families, and concentrate upon furthering the interests of the royal family, to forbid people to wander about in search of political office, and to glorify the lot of those who devote themselves to agriculture and warfare. Duke Xiao put his suggestions into practice, and as a result, the position of the ruler becomes secure and respected, and the state grew rich and powerful. But 8 years later, Duke Xiao passed away, and Lord Shang was tied to 2 chariots and torn apart by the men of Qin. Chu, failing to continue the policies of Wu Qi, suffered from foreign incursion and internal chaos. Qin, applying Lord Shang's laws, became rich and powerful. Yet, though both men spoke what was apt and true, why was it that Wu Qi was torn limb from limb and Lord Shang was pulled apart by chariots? Because the high ministers resented their laws and the common people hated orderly government. And in the present age, the high ministers covet power and the common people find satisfaction in disorder to a far greater degree than did the men of Chu and Qin in the times I have described. If there is no King Tao or Duke Xiao to heed advice, then how will the planners of law and policy ever be willing to risk the fate of Wu Qi and Lord Shang in order to elucidate their laws and policies? This is why our present age is in chaos and lacks a true dictator or king.